1, 2,
And review 70-year-old female
Oh shit, I almost got some blood going. Oh, he's wearing it too.
You're in the bay. Once you get over to the bed, we'll give you the story. Everything's going to happen super fast. Welcome to the emergency room.
I lost the pulse.
It's charter book.
300 please.
I'll keep you on again.
Pulse check. No pulse.
No more pulse.
Yeah. Here, what do the ECMO people say? And her blood pressure is off the dropping.
45 minutes of CPR and no return of circulation. Okay.
Oh.
I want you to picture two different people. Like really visualize them for a second. Both of them grew up in the exact same stressful environment.
Right. So we're talking about a childhood marked by severe neglect, profound poverty, or maybe even abuse.
Exactly. And fast forward 20 years. One of these individuals goes on to build this remarkably satisfying life. They navigate a complex career, sustain a strong marriage, and they manage to break the generational cycle they were born into.
Which is incredible.
It is. But then the other person, who weathered the exact same storm, struggles deeply. They battle chronic isolation, severe depression, and perhaps a substance use disorder.
Yeah, that is basically the most critical question in clinical care.
Right. What is the missing puzzle piece that explains how two humans can endure the exact same trauma but end up on entirely different shores? We are looking directly at you, the listener, and asking you to explore this fascinating biopsychosocial puzzle of human resilience. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
So today's source material comes directly from clinical nursing literature, and it focuses intensely on the individual, interpersonal, and cultural factors that dictate our mental health.
And what this material highlights, and honestly what healthcare professionals are trained to prioritize, is that health is never just the absence of disease.
I mean, it's so much more than that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is this highly volatile, intricate web of our physical age, our genetic blueprint, our deepest cultural beliefs, and even our zip code. If a clinician only treats the physical symptom without assessing that entire web, I mean, they are basically treating a ghost.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because if we want to understand how the outside world affects us, we really have to start by looking inward at how we are physically and psychologically built.
Yeah, the baseline.
Exactly. And a huge part of that is where we sit on our life timeline. We tend to think of age as just a number, or maybe like a marker of physical decline. But the literature argues it actually dictates the entire trajectory of a mental illness.
It fundamentally alters the clinical prognosis. And the literature uses schizophrenia as a primary example here.
Okay, how so?
Well, common sense might suggest that if you are diagnosed at an earlier age, you have a stronger, younger physical body to, endure the treatment.
Sure, that makes sense. You bounce back faster when you're young.
Right. But the clinical data shows the exact opposite. A younger age at onset for schizophrenia strongly predicts a much poorer prognosis.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It's specifically characterized by what clinicians call negative signs. So that's severe apathy, social withdrawal, and just a profound lack of volition.
But what is the mechanism behind that? Like, why does youth make the mind more vulnerable to those specific symptoms?
It comes down to identity formation and coping mechanisms. I mean, if a severe mental illness strikes in your early teens, it interrupts your entire developmental timeline.
Oh, because you're still figuring out who you are.
Exactly. You haven't yet mastered independent living skills. You haven't navigated the friction of holding a job, paying rent, or solidifying an independent personal identity apart from your family.
Right, so you're just not equipped.
Yeah, when the illness hits, you are suddenly fighting a profound cognitive crisis without having your basic adult psychological scaffolding in place. The disease essentially hijacks the construction site of your personality.
Wow, hijacks a construction site.
Yeah.
I instantly think of Erikson's psychosocial stages when you say that. He mapped out human development as this series of critical tasks, and I always visualize his theory like a video game.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, you absolutely have to beat the boss at each level to gain the required skills for the next world. You cannot just use a cheat code to skip a level.
And the clinical implications of that framework are massive, especially for patient safety and priority assessments. Let's look at Erikson's very first stage, trust versus mistrust, which spans from birth to about 18 months.
Just a tiny baby.
Right. The infant is learning whether the world is a safe place that will actually meet their basic needs. If they experience neglect, if they fail to resolve that stage with a sense of trust, Their central nervous system actually adapts to a hostile environment.
So it's wired into them from day one.
Yes, they carry that baseline mistrust into every subsequent stage of development, which fundamentally alters their physiological stress response and makes intimate adult bonds incredibly difficult.
That psychological foundation is fascinating. But the sources also dive really heavily into a purely physical biological foundation too, pharmacogenetics.
Yes.
We've all heard about genetic predispositions to illnesses, like a family history of heart disease. But this is about how your specific DNA dictates your body's mechanical response to psychiatric drugs.
This is a high-priority safety issue in modern medicine. It's something nursing students are tested on relentlessly. Pharmacogenetics examines the specific liver enzymes, primarily the cytochrome P450 system that break down medications.
So based on your genetic code, you process things differently.
Right. You fall into different metabolic categories. You might be a poor metabolizer, an intermediate metabolizer, or an ultra-rapid metabolizer.
Meaning the quote-unquote standard dose printed on the pill bottle is effectively a myth.
A very dangerous myth in some cases. If you are a poor metabolizer, your liver enzymes process the drug at a glacial pace.
So it just builds up.
Exactly. The medication accumulates in your bloodstream, leading to highly elevated serum levels. So a perfectly standard dose of an SSRI or another antidepressant can quickly become toxic, triggering severe, life-threatening side effects.
Oh, that's terrifying.
And on the opposite end, an ultra-rapid metabolizer burns through the medication so quickly that the drug never even reaches a therapeutic level.
So they don't get any relief.
No relief at all. And the clinical risk there is that the provider might label the patient as treatment-resistant or non-compliant, when in reality, the patient's liver is just working in overdrive.
Wait, I have to push back here.
Sure, go ahead.
If our mental health foundation is this rigidly baked into our early childhood attachments, and our biological response to treatment is literally hardwired into our liver enzymes before we are even born, are we just passengers?
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, I mean, if our biology and our past are this deterministic, where is the room for us to actually change our trajectory?
Yeah.
Are we just along for the ride?
Well, I wouldn't dismiss the biology that quickly. The physical constraints are very real. I mean, if your liver is dumping a toxic level of a drug into your bloodstream because of a genetic variant, no amount of positive thinking or willpower is going to fix that.
Right, obviously.
You are a passenger to your pharmacogenetics in that exact moment. But where the clinical literature pivots is what happens after we account for those baselines.
Okay.
We possess the capacity to build profound psychological armor. We are not entirely helpless. And the literature focuses heavily on the concept of self-efficacy to demonstrate this.
Self-efficacy, I always hear that used interchangeably with self-esteem. Are they the same thing?
Not at all. And the distinction is crucial. Self-esteem is an emotional evaluation. It's just how much you like or value yourself.
Okay, so feeling good about yourself.
Right. But self-efficacy is cognitive and action-oriented. It is the deeply ingrained belief that your personal abilities and efforts directly influence the events in your life.
So it's about empowerment.
Exactly. A person with high self-efficacy operates under the conviction that their actions will yield tangible results. A person with low self-efficacy believes they are at the mercy of external forces, which leads to a state of learned helplessness.
And the sources highlight physical exercise as a primary mechanism to build that efficacy, which is super interesting. I imagine that's not just because of the endorphins.
No, it's more profound than that.
It's because of the neurological feedback loop, right? Like you lift a weight, you visibly get stronger, you run a mile, your time improves. It is undeniable physical proof that your effort changes your reality.
Which then rewires your brain to apply that exact same belief to your depression or anxiety.
It creates a closed loop of empowerment.
It really does. And alongside self-efficacy, the literature explores hardiness. This concept was actually pioneered in a 1979 study by Suzanne Kobasa. She was observing highly stressed corporate executives.
Okay, high-pressure environment.
Very high pressure. And she wanted to know why some executives completely collapsed into physical illness under the pressure while others thrived. She isolated hardiness down to 3 specific cognitive traits: commitment, control, and challenge.
Commitment being active engagement in your daily life, and control being pretty similar to self-efficacy.
Right.
But challenge is the one that really shifts the paradigm. It's the cognitive reappraisal of a threat.
Yes, that's the key.
Instead of looking at a sudden life change and thinking, this is going to destroy my routine, a hardy individual shifts their mindset to, how can I adapt my routine to master this new variable?
It transforms anxiety into an activating force rather than a paralyzing one. But we also need to layer in resilience and resourcefulness here, which the literature actually differentiates from hardiness.
Oh, they aren't the same.
No. Resilience isn't just about surviving a trauma or bouncing back to your baseline. High resilience involves flourishing.
Flourishing, I love that word.
It moderates the effects of PTSD and depression through active resourcefulness. And that's the ability to independently problem solve, seek out new information, and adapt to the environment rather than just, enduring it.
Which sounds incredibly empowering. You build your self-efficacy, you harden your mindset, you utilize your resources, and you conquer the mountain. But reading through the text, I caught a major caveat about this entire framework.
What's fascinating here is that the very concept of hardiness carries a massive cultural bias.
Right.
It is highly effective, but primarily for populations that value individualism. The entire premise relies on taking personal control and viewing stress as an individual obstacle to conquer.
But not every culture operates like that.
Exactly. For cultures that prioritize collective harmony, familial consensus, and group relationships over individual achievement, the Western concept of hardiness is not just unhelpful, it can actually cause severe psychological friction.
Because it goes against everything they believe.
Yeah. Demanding an individual take sole control in a culture that values communal decision-making completely isolates the patient.
That flips the entire script.
Yeah.
It means hardiness is essentially armor built for the solo mountain climber. You are strong, autonomous, and you conquer the peak alone. But a massive portion of the world is navigating the mountain tethered to a rope team.
That is a great way to put it.
If you just charge ahead on your own, driven by individual hardiness, you are going to pull everyone else off the cliff.
That analogy transitions us perfectly into the next layer of resilience, which is the interpersonal support systems surrounding the individual. To survive on a rope team, you have to genuinely believe you belong there.
The sense of belonging.
Right. The sources reference Abraham Maslow's concept of a sense of belonging, which requires two distinct elements to function clinically: value and fit.
Right. So value means you are needed by the group, like you were picked for the team. But fit means your personal traits naturally mesh with the environment. You actually enjoy playing the sport.
Precisely. I mean, you can be highly valued by an employer for your skills, but if the corporate culture fundamentally clashes with your ethics, you don't fit. The sense of belonging never materializes, which leaves you vulnerable to burnout.
Which brings us to a vital clinical assessment, right? The difference between social contact and social support.
I think people confuse these constantly. They assume someone who talks to a lot of people is well supported.
Yeah, just because you have a lot of Facebook friends doesn't mean you have support.
Exactly. Social contact is superficial. It's exchanging pleasantries with the barista or waving to a neighbor. It provides routine, but no emotional sustenance.
It's just noise.
Right. Social support, on the other hand, is a protective biological buffer during a crisis. However, the nursing literature outlines two strict criteria for social support to actually mitigate stress. First, the recipient must perceive the support as helpful.
Okay, that makes sense.
And second, the support system must provide what the person actually wants, not what the supporter believes is best for them.
I want you to really think about that for a second. Think about a time you were completely overwhelmed, maybe venting about a disastrous situation at work.
We've all been there.
Someone likely jumped in to fix it with unsolicited advice when all you actually wanted was for them to listen and validate your frustration.
Yep.
In that moment, their intervention wasn't real support for you, regardless of their good intentions. It was a mismatch of needs.
A mismatch that usually leaves the person feeling even more isolated. And when evaluating this rope team, we also have to look at spirituality, which the text identifies as a core component of resilience.
But we aren't strictly talking about organized religion.
No, though they often overlap. Spirituality here is defined as a belief in a higher power, or simply a broader, interconnected meaning to life. The clinical literature highlights studies showing that higher levels of hope, which are often generated by spiritual beliefs, correlate directly with fewer physical and psychiatric symptoms.
Wow, so it has a physical effect.
It does. Hope functions as a biological shield. It reduces the inflammatory stress response and provides a cohesive narrative for suffering.
But giving someone what they need, whether it's the right kind of social support or honoring their spiritual coping mechanisms, is impossible if you don't speak their cultural language.
Absolutely impossible.
What looks like support in one culture looks like an insult in another. Which brings us to the danger of standard care.
The nursing literature details a massive philosophical shift in healthcare training regarding this exact issue. For decades, the gold standard was cultural competence.
Which sounds good on paper.
It does. The assumption was that a provider could memorize a textbook chapter on the generalized traits of a specific demographic and basically become competent in treating them.
Check a box and you're good to go.
Right. But the danger is that this breeds stereotyping. It treats cultures as monoliths. So the modern clinical standard has shifted to cultural humility.
Humility meaning you accept you don't actually know everything.
It is a lifelong, egoless process of inquisitive learning. Cultural humility forces the provider to step down from the position of ultimate authority and allows the patient to be the expert on their own life.
That's a huge shift in power dynamics.
It is, and it's critical when assessing a patient's belief about the cause of their illness. The literature categorizes these beliefs into 3 views: natural, unnatural, and biomedical.
Right, so natural beliefs attribute illness to environmental forces like cold, wind, dampness. Unnatural beliefs attribute illness to outside agents like witchcraft, evil spirits, or divine retribution.
Yes.
And the biomedical view is the foundation of Western medicine, arguing that illness is purely a chemical, genetic, or mechanical failure. I just have to point out the sheer arrogance of a strictly biomedical approach when dealing with a diverse population.
It's a real problem.
If a healthcare system operates on the assumption that the biomedical model is the only valid reality, they are going to entirely alienate patients who hold unnatural or natural views.
Without a doubt.
If a patient believes their severe depression is a form of spiritual retribution, and a doctor simply dismisses that belief as unscientific nonsense while shoving a prescription for an SSRI across the desk, the trust is instantly broken. And as we learned from Erikson's first stage, without trust, healing cannot occur.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is why clinical priority assessments now revolve around asking the patient directly, what do you think caused this problem? And how would you like to be cared for?
Just asking them directly.
Yes, you have to meet the patient in their established reality. And we see the lethal consequences of ignoring this when dealing with the stigma surrounding suicide.
Because suicide isn't viewed universally just as a mental health crisis.
No, not at all. In many cultures, suicidal ideation is interpreted as a profound failure of religious devotion or a shameful personal weakness that basically taints the entire family lineage.
That's a heavy burden.
It is. The clinical reality is that the shame associated with seeking help becomes more terrifying to the patient than the illness itself. The patient's cultural rope team essentially transforms into a trap, which prevents them from accessing life-saving interventions.
So these cultural beliefs are not just abstract sociological concepts. They manifest as invisible forces that dictate very specific physical interactions in a medical setting.
Yes. The literature uses Geiger and David Heizar's transcultural assessment model to map out these invisible forces. Let's look at just 2 of their 6 factors, starting with physical space and communication.
Okay.
A prime example is eye contact.
The mechanism of eye contact is entirely dependent on cultural context. I mean, in Western business or medicine, maintaining direct eye contact signals active listening and respect.
Right. But in various Asian, Native American, or Middle Eastern cultures, sustained eye contact, especially with a perceived authority figure like a physician, can be interpreted as aggressive, disrespectful, or highly intrusive.
Oh, wow.
So if a nurse lacks cultural humility, they might document a patient as evasive, suspicious, or severely depressed simply because the patient is looking at the floor to show cultural respect.
So the clinical judgment is entirely flawed because the cultural translation is missing.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Another of Geiger's factors is time orientation. The text explains that some cultures view time as precise, while others view it as approximate.
And Western medicine is an obsessively precise, clock-based system.
Oh, totally. An appointment is at 10:20 a.m. and you get exactly 15 minutes.
Industrialized cultures operate on clock time, but many agricultural or traditional cultures operate on event time. Time is fluid and dictated by the needs of the community in the present moment, not some ticking watch.
It is incredibly unjust when the medical system slaps a non-compliant label on a patient's record because they arrived an hour late to a strictly timed appointment.
It happens all the time.
The system assumes defiance or lack of care, failing to realize the patient is simply operating on an approximate cultural clock. A morning appointment just means sometime before the sun reaches its peak.
Right.
They aren't resisting medical advice. They're interacting with a rigid system using a fluid cultural framework.
And when a system fails to adapt to the patient, the environment itself becomes the pathogen. Which brings us to the broadest invisible forces discussed in the literature, the social determinants of health, or SDOH.
It's the big picture stuff.
This is a framework utilized by Healthy People 2030, which explicitly states that our health is heavily dictated by the conditions and the environments where we are born, live, learn, work, and age.
So we're talking about the physical and economic realities, neighborhood violence, deep poverty, housing instability.
Exactly. I mean, a clinician can prescribe the most effective, genetically tailored anti-anxiety medication available. But if that patient returns home to an apartment with lead paint, in a neighborhood plagued by gang violence, where their next meal is uncertain, their central nervous system will never exit a state of hyperarousal.
The environment will continuously override the medication.
It will. The literature also heavily emphasizes health literacy as a primary determinant. This isn't just about reading. It is the cognitive ability to find, comprehend, and utilize complex health information to make informed decisions.
So if a patient cannot decode their discharge instructions, the treatment plan is essentially void.
Yes.
And the most sobering part of the source material is the evidence proving that no one is immune to these environmental impacts, not even the people providing the care.
No, absolutely not.
The text includes an evidence-based practice study focusing on critical care nurses following the COVID-19 pandemic.
And the data reveals that these critical care nurses are suffering from astronomical rates of burnout, severe depression, and clinical PTSD.
Right, and these are highly trained, medically literate professionals.
Yeah.
They possess high levels of individual self-efficacy and hardiness.
Which shatters the illusion that individual resilience is infinite.
It really does. You can have all the psychological armor in the world, you can have a flawless rope team, but if the structural environment, the workplace policies, the chronic trauma, the sheer volume of stress is overwhelming enough, the system breaks the individual.
It demands institutional interventions, not just better individual coping mechanisms.
So it proves that the biopsychosocial web is entirely interconnected. You cannot isolate the biology from the psychology or the culture from the environment.
No, you can't.
Which brings us back to our opening puzzle. Those two people navigating the exact same trauma, ending up on entirely different shores.
Right.
What we've learned today is that human resilience is never just one solitary trait. It is a massive, silent collision. It is the developmental stage you're in when the crisis hits.
And your liver enzymes metabolizing a chemical intervention?
Yes. It is the hardiness and self-efficacy you actively build. It is the cultural humility of the people treating you, and the stark reality of whether your physical environment allows your nervous system to finally rest.
Every single piece of that puzzle has to be assessed.
So what does this all mean for you? As you manage your own daily stress, or try to offer genuine support to a friend on your rope team, or even as you evaluate the healthcare systems operating around you, how does this complex web change your perspective on what it means to be healthy?
I think the most important concept to mull over, the question that really lingers from synthesizing all of this clinical literature, is this. If our individual mental health is so inextricably linked to our cultural beliefs, our genetic makeup, and our physical zip code, can we ever truly heal a person without simultaneously fighting to heal the environment they live in?
That is a profound question to walk away with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourself and take care of your rope team.